Welcome to the Wellness Connection podcast with Fiona Kane. I'm your host, Fiona Kane. And this week I have a returning guest. I have Linda Campbell. You would have previously heard her in episode 30, where we talked about grief and different ways of dealing with and talking to people in regards to grief. This time we're going to talk more about people who are dying. So their process, what's happening for them, as opposed to what's happening for the people around them. So welcome, Linda.
Good morning, Fiona. How are you?
I'm well, thanks today. How are you?
I'm fine. Fine.
So for those who haven't listened to or watched episode 30 yet, just a bit of an introduction to who you are.
Okay, so I'm a hypnotherapist, but I'm also an end-of-life doula. So I work with people who are dying and their families to help them through that transition.
Okay. Important work. Very important work. So one of the we started, well, we've talked about this a lot in the past, but one of the things that really came up for me a few years ago, and we had a discussion around this at the time, is there was a Facebook post of there was a famous, I think I might have mentioned this in the last episode, I can't remember now, but there was a famous, I think he was a golfer and he was quite a young man, and he had sort of pretty much very limited time to live, maybe weeks or whatever it was. And he did a post on social media and said something along the lines of, this is my last post. I'm going to spend time with family and friends, blah, blah, blah. Whatever he said, but it was just the very final, post. There were people replying to it with things like, "Oh, hang in there. You never know. Science, like, don't lose hope." And I found it really jarring. I just kind of thought, what planet are you on? Like, how, like, just so not okay. And our culture, I find, is just so not comfortable with death, including me. I haven't been around it a lot, and I'm getting more comfortable with it because I'm getting more used to it. But I've grown up very sheltered from it. So, what are your thoughts in regards to that? That social media post and the way that people were responding to that.
I think it's terrible, really. If a person has accepted their own death,
Mm,
um, telling them to fight, that's one of the things that really
mm,
gets under my skin, actually,
yeah.
that language of fighting an
Yes.
illness.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that then implies that if you don't fight, you're a coward or you're a failure.
Yeah, if you pass away, then you didn't fight hard enough,
Yeah,
apparently.
yeah. Yeah, it's the wrong sort of language, but
Yes.
nobody has the right to tell anybody else to hang in there
Mm,
because we don't know what pain they're in, what suffering they're going through. If they've accepted that their death is imminent,
yes.
that's up to them.
Yes.
And families do this a lot as well.
Mm,
My
yeah.
mum did it with my dad. She kept saying to him, "Don't leave me, George. Don't leave me, George." And it's like, he had bone cancer. He was dying. There was
Yes.
nothing that anybody could do.
Mm,
And he was in a lot of pain. But yeah, that language and that begging the other person to keep going,
mm,
that's about the person who's saying those things.
mm.
It's
Yes. It's
quite a
about your
selfish response,
discomfort.
actually.
Sorry, what was that?
It's a selfish response.
Yes. Yeah.
It's only thinking about themselves, not about the other person and what
Yeah.
they're going through.
Yeah. It's about your pain or your discomfort or your unwillingness to talk about a certain topic. And that whole thing, the be positive thing too, is it's people think that they're being kind or positive if they're saying hang in there, or there's greatest science, technology, whatever. And it's actually, I think that's what I have seen, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, that when people are dying, they're the people around them, it really, like, the people around them who they can really talk to narrows down quite
Mm.
significantly.
It does.
For that exact reason, because they can't actually have real conversations with those other people. And if you are constantly having to carry the burden of other people's discomfort around what's happening to you, it's like, oh well, go away. Fair dinkum. Like you're dealing with what's happening to you already,
Yes,
and then you've got to dance around and pretend and smile and for somebody else's sake. That's not acceptable to expect a person who's dying to deal with your discomfort, to have to manage your
that's right.
discomfort as
That's
well,
right.
or to live in your kind of pretend universe that you need to have. And that is exactly why I think you see that people sort of drop off over time, because the person who's dying, they do not have the energy for that, and they do not have the time for that.
That's right.
Mm,
That's exactly right. And um, coming back to the language for a moment, I mean, I described myself when I said an end of life doula that I work with people who are dying.
mm.
The truth is, we're all dying.
Yes.
From the moment we're born, we're all dying. It's
Yep.
it's some of
Guess
us are
what?
going to die young, some of us are going to die old, but we are all dying.
Newsflash.
And it's about, really, I should say, I work with people who have a terminal illness
Mm,
because people are alive until the moment they take their last breath.
yes. Mm,
And
yeah.
because we have this whole thing around dying, we start to treat people differently. Instead of remembering that they're still the same person, they're
Yes.
still alive.
Mm, yes. Yeah, definitely. And I think even things like, if you feel like, I know that if someone around you is dying, you feel like you can't, burden them with anything that's in your life or whatever it is. And I think there's a balance there. There's a time and there's a place. But I think early on, maybe when people are well enough to still have their friendships and still want to talk to people, I think that they might feel sad to think that their friends can't share with them.
That's right. I think one of the things, if you're going to go to visit somebody or you've met somebody who's got a terminal illness,
Mm.
is to share what's happening in your life with them.
Yes,
Include them in your life
yes,
so that they know that they're important to you
yes, yes.
rather than excluding them
Mm.
because you don't want to, because your problem seems so little compared to theirs.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But just including them will give them a sense of importance to you.
Yes. And also, like you just said, that you're alive until you're not. So why suddenly start treating someone like they've already gone
Yeah,
before they have, and it's also, it's not the other end of the thing where you just go and dump on them and dump on everything, every bit of your problems and every bit of all of your issues, and expect them to carry the weight. It's not that, but it's just simply, if that's your friend and you'd normally talk about, oh, that person at work today, oh, the thing, whatever, or a decision you're trying to make or something like that. I think that you naturally know when that starts to get harder for the person, or they're just not able to have those conversations anymore. But I think until then, I think, just the same as you always would, just have those conversations. Treat that person like they're still here and alive, because they are.
yeah, yeah. And another thing, like I asked you, I said, "How are you?" when
Yes.
we started this.
Yes.
That's one that you should avoid, I think, with somebody who has a terminal illness.
Yes.
Rather say something like, "How are you feeling today?"
Okay. Yeah. Make it more about present, like
Yes,
right here,
make it
right
about the
now.
present moment.
Yes.
Because how are you? Well, they're dealing with the fact that
Well,
they've got a
actually,
terminal illness. It's like, that's it.
yeah.
But how are you feeling today? Because they will have days where they feel fine
Yes.
or
Yeah.
reasonably fine, and they will have days where they feel really down and depressed. So
Yes.
giving them that opportunity, bringing them into the present moment and
Mm,
giving them an opportunity to talk about their feelings. And
mm,
depending on the relationship that you have with that person,
mm.
they might be able to open up about how they're really feeling.
Yes. And there's not many people, in my experience, there's not many people who will actually hear that. So that when I think it's very isolating, I think, for people when they're in that situation. Like, it's very emotionally isolating because if you're propping up everyone around you and smiling and pretending everything's okay, and you can't actually say to anyone, well, you know what, Ashley, I'm terrified, or I'm in pain, or I'm overwhelmed, or I'm really angry, or I'm sad, or like whatever it is, you have to be able to have those conversations. And I think it's important, again, to understand, if you're having that conversation with someone, you don't have to fix it. They don't think that you're going to somehow fix it. They just need to be real with somebody.
Yes,
And I think that we underestimate just letting someone be real. That's all they're asking for. They're just saying, like, I need to be able to be, not like, because it's so much energy, just even in general life, it's a lot of energy if you have to put on a facade or pretend or prop other people up. But I can't even imagine what that would be like when you're dealing with, end of life situation, which often is, debilitating and tiring and all of the other things. Like, the last thing you have is the energy to just be on the whole time and pretending. So,
yeah,
that sort of being that person that they can be real with and say, well, you know what, uh, this is how I
that's
feel
right.
today.
That's right.
Mm.
So, and it's about letting them control the conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, that's important because when you're going through a terminal illness, there's often a feeling of things not being in your control,
Yes. Mm.
especially if there's been lots of medical interventions that where the doctors take over.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah,
And yes,
exactly.
you have the choice, but often people just go with the flow. If a doctor says this is what we do, this is what they do.
Mm.
Um, so people often end up feeling like they've lost control of their lives.
Yes. Yeah.
So just letting them control a conversation can help restore some of that feeling of control.
Well, just having that sense of agency, and I think that goes even further. So for starters, it's like you were saying, let them control the conversation. So there are some people that do want to talk about the weather and actually don't want to talk about
That's right.
anything else. And if that's what they want to talk about, fine. Just become
Yes.
an expert on the weather. That's perfectly okay. They're allowed to avoid the topic, not talk about it, not want to talk about it. That's totally up to them. On the other hand, though, if they do want to talk about the topic, don't sort of, oh, no, you'll be okay. Or, brush it off and talk about the weather, because that they're actually telling you they need to talk about it. So it sort of goes further with the agency, I think, too, in regards to, so someone's maybe received a diagnosis, or they've, wherever they're at in their journey. But these people, like, sometimes they might want to, I don't know, do a special fast or go to a retreat, or they might want to not do any of that, but they want to do chemo, or they might, have decided that, what, they've done that up until a certain point. They don't feel that it's worthwhile. They're going to feel terrible. They're going to feel bad enough anyway. Don't want to do chemo, whatever it is. But I think that people need that agency to be able to make those choices. So I think that's the other thing too. You can maybe talk to them about them, and help them, and have discussions with them. But I think ultimately let people have the agency to say, actually, you know what? I know I have limited time left, and this is how I choose to do it.
Yes. I think I think that's really hard for some family members as well.
It is.
I once worked. This was as a hypnotherapist, actually, not as an end of life doula. I once worked with a man. His family um, wanted him to come and see me. They wanted me to persuade him to carry on with treatment, whereas he had bowel cancer. He'd had enough.
Mm,
He had accepted. It was a very aggressive form of cancer. He had accepted that this was the end for him of,
mm,
and his family wanted him to keep on fighting that language again,
mm,
and they weren't listening to him.
mm, exactly.
So,
And,
yeah, he was tired.
mm,
He was
and I think
really,
that's
really tired of all the interventions and all the therapy, and he just wanted to let go.
yes, yeah. And it doesn't mean that you can't have those discussions with your loved one. And of course, we want people to still be here and we want all of those things. But I think there's a point in the discussion where you have to understand that that person's made a choice. So, fair enough to say, well, how about this or what about that? Or and even just the things of, like some people, when they go through things like this, they want to read books and they want to learn about a thing and they want to become an expert and whatever and other people just don't want to do any of that. So it's kind of it is okay to have conversations with people or to if they want to chat about options and things like that and what do you think and whatever else. But I think then it is also we need to accept that people have a right to have agency and make their choices, and
Yes,
no matter how hard it is for you, that acceptance that, okay, that's your choice. Okay, let's do that.
yeah. And I think in some ways, well, I know our culture does not deal with death and dying
Mm.
very well at all.
No, 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 we don't. Yeah.
We almost, it's like we pretend it's not going to happen.
Mm. Yes, we
And
do.
then when somebody is diagnosed with a terminal illness, some people still are going along thinking it's not going to happen. And that can be the patient as well. It's not all
Yes.
people come to an acceptance
Mm. No.
um, of their own mortality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most will do, especially once they've got a terminal diagnosis, but some won't. Yeah,
Mm. Yeah, and
it's
I think that they're allowed to as well. Like,
exactly.
I mean, we're all going to get there at some point, unless it's really sudden and we don't have time to think about it. But otherwise, we're all going to have that point, and I think that we it's respect people's choice to be as open and talking about it, and I know my one of my grandmothers. So one grandmother was like, "Don't talk about it. We don't," and the other grandmother was she had a picnic at her gravesite where she was going to be. And she wanted to do that because she wanted everyone to see where it was. Like she wanted people to get used to the idea of coming to visit her at a gravesite, right? And I know my aunt chose her site, whereas my mother didn't really want to do that. And then she kind of ultimately wanted to be with her sister, but she couldn't have gone there and to the
Mm.
cemetery and chosen it. Whereas once I chose a spot for my mum, I've actually chosen a spot next to mum because I thought, oh well, where else am I going to be? I may as well just be next to mum.
Yeah.
So I when I go and visit mum, I was like, hi mum, is like, hi future home. It's a little weird. So that's for some people that's really crazy and weird, and other people that's just really normal.
There's graveyards in Europe. I think in Belgium is one place where they actually have barbecues and picnic areas in the graveyards
Okay.
because people will go and spend, somebody's birthday or
Yes.
a christening or something, and they'll go to the grave of grandma or whoever,
Mm.
and they'll have a celebration there, and they'll do things like pour wine on the grave so that the
Yes.
person can have the wine.
Yes, yeah. I think my cousin did that recently. At my other cousin, at his brother's grave. I think he poured like some bourbon, took a bottle of a can of bourbon or something, and poured that. Yeah, mate, here's your drink. I've seen people do that a bit actually at the cemetery. That it's sort of my mum and my cousin are both there, and so I've been there a few times, and they leave them a can or a
Yeah,
bottle or something.
yeah.
And I think that's like, look, the other thing too is that even with the sort of going to cemetery or not going to cemetery to visit people, I think it's okay one way. Like, if you don't want to go, that's fine, and if you do want to go, that's fine. But yeah, I think getting back to the person who's in the situation where it's the end of their life. What do you? what would you suggest are the things that people could sort of have an awareness around of how they could maybe support that person who's coming to the end of their life?
Um, Support the carer. Who's the person who's actually caring for that
Mm-hmm.
person who's
Yes.
approaching the end of their life?
Mm-hmm.
They will need support. So that's
Yes.
one way that you can do it. It's supporting that person to give them what they need to be able to cope
Mm-hmm.
with what's happening. Don't don't say, if there's anything you need, just call me. Actually do things, say, cook something and take it round,
Mm-hmm.
or phone up and say, I'm going to the shops, do you need anything? What do you need? What can I
Yes.
get you? So practical stuff like that can be really, really helpful, because as it gets closer to the time that the person's actually going to leave, the the people that are caring for them and their friends and everybody, they're starting to go through grief, anticipatory grief.
Mm.
So parts of their brains are going to not be working properly. So just giving them some practical help in various ways can ease some of that burden for them.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And
Yeah.
keep visiting the person who's got the terminal illness, or keep inviting them to things.
Mm.
Even if they can't come, it helps them to feel that they're still remembered and still included.
Yes. Yeah. Getting back to that, not treating them like they've already gone,
Yes, yeah.
and
So if you're
giving
having
them
a
that space.
party for some reason, invite them.
Mm.
They may not be able to come. And
Yes.
again, obviously, I'm talking about before the last few days
Yeah.
when they're in a coma or whatever. But if they're still um, ambulatory and with it, invite
Mm.
them. They may not feel like coming because they may not want to spend time with a bunch of people, um, having to pretend that they're fine,
Mm.
which we tend to do when we're with a larger group.
Yes.
But at least include them and let them know that you're remembering them and you're thinking about them. Because
Mm.
as you say, often it's, yeah, kind of don't want to. We don't want to face it, but that's our discomfort.
Mm. Yes. Yeah. And the other thing too is that they might want, so the person, depending on where you are, depending on how close you are and where you are in this situation, but that person, maybe they might want help with things like they might be writing letters to their children,
That's right.
so they might want help with that, or they might want to give them to you for safekeeping or whatever it is, or they might want help organising a solicitor to sort out their will and their, or the guardianship and all of those kinds of things. They might want practical things, or they might want you to take them to the cemetery, all the things. So they might want a whole bunch of that sort of stuff,
That's right.
or they
Another
might not
thing
want any of.
you would be asking them if they want to go through photos
Mhm.
and getting them to tell you what the photos are about, and maybe
Yes.
writing on the back of the photo who's in the photo.
Yes.
That recording their memories in some
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that, for my mother, who wasn't, she had moments where she could talk about the fact that she was dying, but sort of, but not really, but sort of. It was a bit strange, but anyway, it was her way. But what she was saying, what she did say a lot of the time though was, "Is there anything you want to know?" And I could tell what she was trying to do. She was sort of saying, "Well, like, I'm not going to be here. Like, what do you need to know? What are the questions you have?" And it was that sort of thing. It's that kind of, when we did go through some photo albums and things, but it was that, needing to pass off all the information, because she knew that she had a limited time to do that. And Mum actually did choose the songs for her own service.
Yep.
She wanted to do that, so she did that. But there was a lot of things that she didn't want to do and she didn't want to talk about, and we didn't. But then she made very specific things that she did want to talk about. And she would say to me, I've changed my mind. I go to there and she's changed my mind about that song. Go on this song instead. So I kind of had this file on my computer and I'd sort of open it up and I'd sort of change it up and say, okay, so we'll make that number 3 and we'll put that one into like supplementary songs or whatever it was. So she would say to me, oh yeah, I've changed my mind. So she'd be thinking about it and the next time I saw her, she'd tell me. And that was really good actually because it made it much easier for me afterwards, because I didn't have to think, oh, which
Yes.
one, or so that was great. But I just went with her, and there was a couple of moments where sort of right at the end where she did bring up a couple of things about like some of her fears around what might happen, and we talked about that, and very briefly. But I was just, again, I just was really respectful of her where she was at, and then most of the time she didn't want to talk about anything. And the other thing that again, include people, because what you can do is you can be, like you said, like we were talking about before, go around and talk to them about the family. Oh, well, so and so's got a new boyfriend, and the kids are doing the HSC at the moment, or like whatever is happening. Include them. But the other thing that Mum and I did is we sang songs. Like I would get my
Yes.
phone and play a song, and we were singing things like Maggie May by Rod Stewart. Go figure. Just it was just a song that we both knew, and we both knew most of the words or whatever. And it's but we'd sing a couple of songs, and it's just kind of just being present with someone. And sometimes it's just being present, sitting quietly. Sometimes it's listening to music, or it might be going through photos or whatever it is. But there's a lot that you can do. It's kind of just being present with someone, and treating them like they're still your friend,
That's
your
right.
mother, your whoever they are, and not acting like they're not, they're gone, because they're not.
Yeah.
They're still there.
Yeah. And
Mm,
it's again, it's I think it's hard for some people because it's about they're then forced to come to terms with their own mortality.
mm,
When you're spending time with somebody who has a terminal illness, it kind of forces you back to look at the fact that you're going to die someday.
mm,
I think
exactly.
that's where people's fear comes in. One thing I did want to mention is don't assume a person's spiritual or religious beliefs, because that might change
Mm,
the closer they get to their own end of life. Somebody who has not set foot in a church or been religious at all
mm,
may want to speak to a priest or a minister, pastor.
yes.
So that, again, it's about allowing them to control that and not judging them for that.
Yes. Yeah.
Don't go, what do you want to talk to a minister for? You've never wanted to before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Exactly. If that's what they want,
if
that's
that's
their
what they
choice.
want, that's what they want, that's what they need at that time.
Yes. Yeah.
And most ministers or priests have been around a lot of dying people. That's
Yeah.
a lot of people at that end point.
Mm, yeah.
So, yes, that's
Whatever that
something.
person needs, because um, it's, well, everyone's got a different opinion on this, but I kind of do believe that we have a soul, and
Yeah,
we need to make, I don't know, amends might be the wrong word, but we need to settle certain things, or often we do, and so people will make different choices around that, what that looks like for them.
that's right.
And so just being really respectful of that, that's that person's process. Absolutely. And whether that's like, don't let the priest in, or I need to see the priest, or whatever it looks like for them, that is
Yeah,
perfectly okay for them.
yeah. Um, with the last um, podcast that we did, I mentioned Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and
Mm.
the stages of grief, the
Yes.
5 stages of grief,
Yes.
um, which is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. That was the original 5 stages.
Yes.
Kubler-Ross based that on working with people in a hospice, and it was all about accepting their own
Mm.
diagnosis and their own death.
Yes.
Um, so recent research is showing that it's not, even with people that are dying, it's not that process completely. There are some other stages, and some people may not go through it. But it's a useful model, especially if you're working with somebody or caring for somebody who has a terminal illness, to recognize that they will go through different stages.
Yes. Yeah.
There might be a day where they're feeling angry at the world. They
Yes.
might feel like they've been dealt
Mm.
a wrong hand.
And there might be many days or many months of that, depending on
Yeah,
the individual and
yeah.
what's going on.
And the bargaining, all those stages.
Mm.
Um, and
Mm.
again, it's about allowing them to go through and experience that the way that they need to experience it.
Mm.
Don't try and force them into another stage.
Mm. Yeah.
It's
Look on
about
the bright side.
yes, exactly.
Go away.
Don't give up hope.
Yeah, yeah,
All
all that
those
sort of,
things.
if they need to be angry at the world, they need to be angry at the world. That's
That's
okay.
right.
It's just a process. It's a process. And I think that's the thing, understanding we don't understand that with emotions, and I think that's a whole other topic really, but we don't understand emotions, and we don't understand that sometimes people are I'll give you an example. That singer I always talk about, his name is Ren. He's got all these different kinds of songs, and a lot of them he uses, it's his way when he writes a song, it's his way of venting whatever's going on for him at the time. And so he's written a song. I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, it's quite an angry kind of, destroy everything, destroy everyone, kill the world, everyone, whatever. It's that kind of a vibe, that song. And I heard him do an interview about it the other day because people have reacted quite, oh my God, like, oh, his other songs are really, heartfelt and make me feel good, and this one's just really terrible. Oh, how could he, And he said it's not who he is. It's just him expressing that moment, So it's we sort of, that person who's dying and they're having that time where they're really really angry, it doesn't mean they're a horrible angry person. It means they're just processing their anger. you know
That's right.
or like a songwriter might, or like somebody,
Yeah.
it's funny, we kind of attach it to, well, it has to be this or it has to be that, or no, like you said, it is a process. And all of those, whether they go through all of those different stages or not, they are stages, they are there for processing. And it's perfectly normal to have that, and not have someone have to rewrite it for you, or get you to, like, to sanitize it for, them to sanitize it for your, so that you don't feel offended, or that, whatever it is. Yeah, I think it's like we try and sanitize things too much and don't understand that some things are a process.
Yes. Yeah. And again, it is about letting the person with the illness control the situation.
Mm.
And just, sometimes just being with them. You don't need to say anything.
Yes,
Like you
yeah.
said, singing songs with your mum. It's just about being there and letting them know that you're there.
Mm. Yes.
You don't need to be doing anything or saying anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know even with mum, when we might chat about, I don't know, the nurses will come into the ward and they'd have like a groovy hairstyle. So, "Oh, wow, look at her hairstyle. Look at that," or, they, whatever it is. But, we just talk about just small talk, the same as you would if you're, I don't know, if you're just sitting around in a waiting room somewhere with someone, you might do the same thing. You might just talk about, "Oh, look at that over there," or, "Oh, look at those flowers. Oh, look at that painting." Or we sort of just did the same thing. We just continued that sort of discussion. So,
Yeah. And the other thing too, um, sometimes as it gets closer to the end, to those last few days where the person is um, actively starting to die, it can be good for the people that are closest to them to give them permission to go.
Mm, definitely.
And I know that can be hard, but um, like I said with my mum, she kept pleading with my dad not to leave her. And
Yes.
I had to take her aside and say, look, he's in a lot of pain.
Mm,
He he's not going to recover from this. He's not going to come back from this.
mm,
And she took that on board and she went in and she gave him permission to go. And he died within 2 hours.
yes. Yeah.
He was waiting on that from her. He was,
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah,
I've seen this in my own life, and I've also there's a hospice nurse that does lots of YouTube videos and things, and I've seen her talk about this as well. And sometimes eh, people actually won't go until the family have left the room, or
that's
whoever's
right.
left the room, because there's someone, or all the family, whoever it is, that is sort of, they can't leave them. They have trouble leaving that person. So sometimes, and this hospice nurse on her YouTube video recently I saw, she sort of said, "Oh, well, sometimes when we realize that someone's been hanging on for way longer than you normally would, sometimes we actually ask the family to go out for a little while." And because we know that person's ready to go, but they're just hanging on.
Yep,
And then so then sometimes then they go just after the family's left, sort of thing.
that's right.
And I even did that sort of with mum. I did give mum space, as I ended up being with mum when she passed, but I also gave her space. I said, and I kind of accepted that if she went when I wasn't there, that was what she needed to do. And if she went when I was there, but I very definitely verbally, even though she wasn't conscious, I gave her permission, and
Yes.
encouraged her. You know, your job's done. Blah blah blah. You know, off you
Yep.
go when you're ready. Whatever. So it is true that that sometimes people, it's harder for them to go if the family hanging on, or if people hanging on. Sometimes they want people there holding their hand. Sometimes they don't, or they need to go, quietly when no one's there. And there's not really a wrong or right of it. It just is. It's different needs, and awarenesses, and even things like, you're talking before about like the respecting their spiritual stuff, whatever it is. I've read about a lot, and also seen in my family different people having experiences with seeing their past relatives
Yes.
before they die. And
Yes.
I personally think that they are seeing them, but whatever your belief is, totally fine. However, if it's their belief, let them have it, right?
Yes.
So also don't go, "Oh, well, that's not possible." Rah, rah, rah. It's like, no, if
Exactly.
they're seeing Uncle so and so, or if they're seeing their husband, or their mother, or their whoever it is, encourage it. Let them, because if that's giving them comfort, well, then that's amazing. So why do you need to be right, or to,
Yeah.
get out your
Yeah.
science textbook, or just let them have that.
Yeah. Lots of uh, people that work in hospice uh, have, they say often the person, just even if they're unconscious or in a coma, they have a moment of clarity not long before they die. And they will often reach out for somebody that's not
Yes.
there,
Yeah.
say somebody's name,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I know
somebody
my
that has
grandfather did.
already died. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and he was quite specific. My grandfather, I think it was his brother and his father were there. He said, "Oh, they're here," and he named them, So, and if whether or that's really happening, which I think it is, or if it's that person, their brain shutting down and they're having hallucinations, like, who cares?
Who cares
Like,
if it makes
it
it
doesn't matter.
if it makes it? I mean, I'm like you. I believe that there is some
Yes.
continuation,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Ultimately, what we want is that person to have comfort, and to have whatever they need to let go, and to move on, out of, into the whatever the next thing is. I don't know what it is, but anyway, they need that permission to do that, and they need the feeling, um, something that, if they need certain things to bring them comfort around that,
That's right.
then that's fine, you
Yeah.
know. And I think this hospice nurse, she also talks about, other things like oh, they've got a special diet. They can't really eat this or that. So what? If they, I know that the hospice that my aunt was in, they had a drinks trolley, like a bar cart, and they would wheel it around a few times. I think it was more than once a day. I can't remember now, but at least once a day. And it's like whatever you want, there's a whiskey or there's a vodka or there's a whatever, and great, and you don't have to do that. It's whatever, but it's just there's not the time to start, worrying about your diet or worrying about whether what you drink or whether or not someone's whatever they're doing. Like it's the time to just let people do whatever works for them and brings them comfort and reduces their pain or whatever it is. And I think
Yes.
we got to. I think sometimes it's hard, but we've got to let go of some of the things, and it can be actually hard if you're the person's carer because you've learned to be really rigid around certain things because you've had this protocol of trying to care for this person, and it's you've had to manage the medications and you've had to manage the diet and this and that and all the things, and you've been doing that so much. It's been so much a part of your life for so long, and it's sometimes actually hard for the carer to switch out of that mode into a more relaxed kind of, oh, okay, no, this is a different phase now. I don't have to worry about that so much. And even the phase of, and I think that it's important as well. And obviously, look, if you're able to speak to a nurse, or a doula or, like you or whoever it is, but someone who understands how this works, but because can be very confusing, but there is a certain point at which the person will stop. They'll refuse food for a long, like often before they refuse drink, and then they eventually start refusing pretty much everything. And that also is a thing, like where we think, oh, well, we've got to feed them. Oh, we've got to make. No, they have a certain time where their body it's everything's
Their
coming to an
organs
end.
are shutting down.
They are, yeah,
Yeah.
and so they can't really have it anymore, and they don't want it. They're not attracted to it, and again, it's a process. It's actually part of a natural process, and it is normal. It's how it is. So it's also having that acceptance of, when they choose to stop eating, and the nurses and things, like if they're in a hospital or somewhere, they kind of know how to manage different things and keep the mouth moist and all the bits and pieces that they do for just general kind of oral health or whatever they need to do while the person's in that phase. But yeah, just understanding that there are phases, and so I think it's letting go of, because we have that phase that we're in if we're caring for someone at home, and or even if they stay at home when they pass, but we're caring for them, and we have a very set idea about how it should be, or all the things we have to do, and suddenly all of the things, like all of the appointment times, they don't matter anymore, and all of the diet protocols, they don't matter anymore, and all the things. And I think it can be, you sort of hold on to those things rigidly because you've been trying really hard to help your person, and then it can be really challenging, yeah, just for the
Yes.
carer to switch
Yes.
to that. Oh, okay, no, we've moved into a different
And
place now.
that's where somebody who's not the primary carer but
Mm.
can step up and give some support to the carer
Yes,
and
yeah,
can maybe
yeah.
help the carer realise that
Yeah,
they don't need to
that
worry
doesn't
about
matter
those things
anymore. We
anymore.
don't need, yeah, exactly. Because I know that, even I think my mum was in palliative care for, I think it was like 20, nearly a month, 23, 24 days. I can't remember what it was. And I just, and everything changed quite dramatically. So first she went in, and because she had probably needed it earlier than what she eventually did go, she got better initially. She felt better because she sort of suddenly had fluids and good medications and things like that. So initially she picked up and she was getting better. And so she had that sort of phase initially, and then things sort of started to slowly change, and then all of a sudden there's sudden shifts over and over and over again for days and days. There was all these sudden changes. And that's the thing. It's kind of just understanding, it's that ability to kind of switch into, oh, we're in this phase now. Oh, we're in this phase now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because initially I was going in, and my ritual was to go in and I'll make you a cup of tea. I'm making a cup of tea, and then the day came where she didn't want the cup of tea, and I was like, oh, okay, this is where we're shifting now, and it is hard, but it's just part of it. It's accepting that that's really natural
Yes.
thing
And
for them,
yeah,
and
it is hard. Like
yeah,
with my mum, she I went in one day and she was basically unconscious in a coma. And I thought, this is it. This is the end. 2 days later, she came out of the coma and picked up again.
Yes. Mm.
So it was only for a few days, and then she went into a coma
Yes. Yeah.
again, and that was it.
Yeah.
But managing your own feelings during that time can be really hard
Yes. Yeah.
because you're preparing for this and then something else happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the thing. It's not getting your hopes up when that happens as well. It's not unusual for
That's right.
people to have that pickup just before. So yeah, just managing yourself around that.
Yeah.
Look, I am aware that my computer's giving me all sorts of signals about things. I think it's saying that running out of space, it's doing something. I don't know. So, based on that, I think that we should sort of wind up shortly. But just
Okay.
before we do, though, if my computer holds out and if it lets us do that, just one other thing to mention too, I think is just, and maybe it's something else we can talk about another time, but just touching on how different cultures celebrate or how different cultures act around death.
Approach death. Yes.
Yeah, approach death. Yeah, yeah. So, any
Yeah.
sort of comments on that because it can be quite broad. Uh,
Look, I think in our Western culture, we've become very detached from death.
yes.
People used to die at home, whereas now they tend to die in hospital or hospice. Uh, People used to have the body laid out at home,
Mm,
all those things.
yeah.
And we've lost that. We've lost that connection
Mm.
there. But in other cultures, we were talking about this before. What was that tribe that
Oh,
in
in
Indonesia that
Indonesia, yes.
they
They
mummify
are
the dead person and then they bury them and then they dig them up once a year and dress them in new clothes and
yes. I try not to be really judgy, but I'm really struggling with that one.
well,
That's
it would be interesting, and I don't know that anybody, there's been any studies. It'd be interesting to look at how those people, when they're dying, how do they feel? Are they more
yeah.
accepting of it because they
Mm.
know that they're going to be mummified and
And
brought out
celebrated.
into the light once a year? Or
Yeah, I don't know the pronunciation, but it's Taroja, Taroj, a Taroja tribe. But yeah, I don't know. How would they feel about it? I don't know. Maybe they think it's a good thing because they're going to be, who knows? I grown up in a culture where, not really around death a lot. And so for me, it feels just a bit horrifying. But
and I'm not sure with that tribe either. What are they Buddhist or Muslim,
yeah, I don't
or
know.
are they some other religion? I have no idea. But yeah, it would be interesting to do um, some more research along those customs.
Yeah, I think people's customs around death and dying are interesting, and I think that we're very kind of closed and very unable to deal with it in the Western world. And I think that we need to learn how to have conversations and open
Yeah,
up to it.
yeah.
Whether or not we need to be digging up our relatives every year, not for me. But fair enough if that works for that culture. But yeah, certainly celebrating people's life, but celebrating them while they're still alive and treating people like, we like you said, we're alive until we're not.
We have moved again with language. Often now, people don't have a funeral; they have a celebration of life.
Life, yes.
So we've moved. We're moving, I think, into that.
Yes.
And there's a movement where there's death cafes
Mhm.
where people can go along and discuss death and dying.
Mhm.
Um, so I think there is a change happening.
Yes. Yeah.
Another custom, just off the top of my head, is Tibetan Buddhism. Um, they would just leave the body out for the vultures. So it's a sky funeral. And
Yes.
then they would gather the bones after the vultures have finished.
Yes.
That kind
Not for my Australian sensibilities, I just can't deal with that, but, yeah, I think it's probably a bit like even the sort of the Viking ones I've seen on television, at least they burn the bodies, like, it's I think that's I don't
I
know.
think, well, with that one in Tibet, it's because there's not much else you can really do with the body there.
Yes, yeah, like, I understand the burning those burning rituals and things, and they do the same thing in India, I believe as well, I've seen that, but yeah, just yeah. Anyway, that's all a bit much for me, that stuff. But yeah, it's like it shows you though. It's the beliefs we have around these things are very much about the culture that we've grown up in and what we're used
That's
to.
right.
And I think if I could sort of summarize sort of today the most important points for today, I think they really are to being respectful of a person who in their process, whatever their process is, being respectful of where they're at and just supporting them where they're at.
Yes. Yeah. That's and allowing them to dictate um, conversations or those kinds of things, and
Mm,
including them as much as you
yes.
can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Treating them like they're still here because they are,
Yeah. Until they
giving
take their
them
last breath.
giving them choice, giving them agency, and just allowing them to in their own process to be where they need to be, and not trying to dictate how it should be or getting them to look after you and put a happy face on just so that you can feel comfortable.
Yeah.
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 Okay. Well, look, thank you so much for that, Linda. I really
Thank you
appreciate it.
for having me.
And if people want to get in contact with you, I will put your details in the show notes. But is there a website or something that you want to draw people's
For
attention to?
the end of life doula, it's walkingwithyou.com.au.
Okay, walkingwithyou.com.au.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for that, Linda. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. Thanks, Fiona.
And thank you for everyone at home listening, whether or not you're listening or watching. I appreciate you. And can you please like, subscribe, and share? And don't forget that there's episode 30 where I spoke to Linda as well in regards to grief for the person grieving as opposed to the person who's passing away. So please check out that episode as well. And I'll see you all next time. Thank you. Bye.